This is not a time to be quiet. It's a time for brave politics. It's time to speak up. It's time to speak out. It's time for brave politics. We have to be less afraid about other people because then we let them win. We let them be the brave ones. And do we really want them to be the brave ones who say terrible things? Or do we want decent people to say good things, community building things, loving things, coming from a good place? Do we want to hear from them or do we want to hear from the terrible people? Because if we want to hear from the terrible people and we only allow them to have voices, then that's what we're producing. So I don't want that to happen.
Hey friend, welcome back to the show. I cannot wait for you to meet our guest today. I am so excited to welcome my dear friend, Nancy Thompson. And this is a little bit of a long intro only because we don't get into it in the show. And I really want you to know who Nancy is. So Nancy is one of the fiercest powerhouse women who is the model of resilience and courage and bravery. And she also models for all of us what it looks like to stand up and to raise your voice against issues in the world that you have had enough of, and willing to let go of your fears and insecurities and just step out of your comfort zone, raise your public voice, and fight for change that is meaning to you, whatever that change is. So regardless of whatever side of the aisle you fall on, your belief systems or your ideology, I hope that you will take a hot minute here and just open your minds to the incredible teachings Nancy has to offer all of us today about facing our fears and becoming fearless, even in the midst of fear. So just a quick little bit about Nancy and her movement that she has built. So Nancy is a mom here in Texas of at the time, 16, 14, and 8-year-old. And she was so mad about school shootings here in Texas. Texas has had several significant and heartbreaking events here. Every day we send our kids to school, we don't know if it's the last day we're going to see them. Did we hug them enough? Did we tell them we love them enough? Do they know that they are special in this world? And Nancy was fed up with this feeling. And so one day she made a poster and she went downtown to the Texas Capitol in Austin as a protest of one to let Governor Greg Abbott know just how pissed she was. She was inspired by MAD and Shannon Watts, who's incredible and who's the founder of Mothers Demand Action, which is another movement against school shootings. And when Nancy wrote the sample draft of the poster, she realized the acronym was MAGA, M-A-G-A, Mothers Against Greg Abbott. That's what she wrote on the poster. And because she was a mom, all she was trying to do that day was keep her kids safe. And today she's fighting for Texas families and keeping all of Texas children safe. That's really where she started and where she's continued to go. So I just want to let you know that she is a rare gem who still holds out on that dream of getting people of all opinions and ideologies and belief systems to sit down and to really talk to one another. And even more than that, she really focuses on listening to each other, to hear each other's stories and why it is that we believe what we believe. She is kind. She's willing to listen to anybody with a different perspective, as long as they're not ugly. She's willing to listen and consider. And she has this gift of not only hearing other people's sides of the story, but also articulating in a clear and wise way why it is that she believes what she believes and the reasoning behind it. So even if we don't agree as a listener to her, belief systems or ideology or politics or whatever, that's not why we're talking today. We're talking today because she models what it is to talk to people from different perspectives and to respect each other and love each other and consider why it is that we all believe what we believe and how can we come together and actually just solve problems. Because all of us from this perspective, we're all moms, and especially in Texas and the states that have the majority of the school shootings, we're terrified, and it hasn't gotten better. It hasn't gotten better. I was one of the first responders to the Uvalde shooting from my vocation. And that was heartbreaking. And I'm a first responder. So that's what I did, and dealing with trauma and people and tragedies. So that's my gift, but it was still awful. And I was still a mom. This is a big deal. So I'm just grateful for Nancy and the work she's doing. And I hope that she continues to make significant change. So you can find her in her gigantic Facebook group, Mothers Against Greg Abbott, and Mothers for Democracy, and become a member there if that's something that resonates with you. So anyway, help me introduce Nancy Thompson. And she's the busiest woman I know. So I'm so thankful that she found some time for us today. Awesome. Enjoy the show.
I'm Dr. Charlie Hornis, highly anxious people pleaser turned master certified professional life coach. Learning to manage my brain was so life-changing for me that I got certified so that I could teach these incredible evidence-based practices to you. Are you ready for massive change? Let's go.
Okay, I'm going to introduce my dear friend, Nancy Thompson, and I need her to introduce herself for us because she is one of the greatest people I know, one of the most resilient and fascinating women.
You're so nice. You're so nice. I'm just a mom in Austin, Texas. Nancy Thompson. I'm the founder of Mothers Against Greg Abbott and Mothers for Democracy. And I'm just a mom. Just mom, Austin, Texas, just trying to save our children and help Texas families.
That's fantastic.
Pretty simple.
This is a hard time right now to be engaging in what you're engaging in. And I think it takes a lot of courage and guts and grit. How are you surviving all of this in this climate?
The climate is really dynamic, and it seems to be changing day by day, week by week. I mean, something that can really impact you last week can be totally different the following week. You have to really learn how to roll with the punches, and you have to sort of compartmentalize a lot of things and just put them into compartments and then switch gears and put them into another compartment. So there's definitely a lot of that going on with just juggling. But overall, I want to say that I think this, if other people are feeling like there's a lot of turbulence, there's a lot of unrest, there's a lot of unease, you're not alone. I think all of us really feel that way. And probably everybody who's on, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, you're just not feeling very settled and you're not feeling comfortable. And there's so much vulnerability in what we do every day right now. So it's just a really hard time. The thing I find especially challenging at this moment is I have two children graduating from high school with very different stories. One child, I'm setting off to college and she's going to go out of state. So she's going to be thousands of miles away from her family. And there's a lot of trust in the universe that we have to give as parents when we're letting our baby birds fly from the nest for the first time. It's so hard to trust the universe right now and to trust the world with all the news that is happening on a daily basis. That is really very, very hard. And then on the other hand, I have a special needs son who's also graduating. And he's probably never going to not live with us at home. And the services that should be available to him have been cut and cut and cut. And now he can only participate in one program in our city for special needs kids versus a few years ago, they had 10 programs. Now they just have one. And that's heartbreaking. It also feels like there's no possibilities. It feels like there's nothing to look forward to. It feels like I have one kid with the world is her oyster. She has all of these possibilities of things she could do. And I have another kid who doesn't have anything. And it's just,
I feel like your kids are a big driving force of what you do, just being able to see how passionate you are talking about them.
Yeah, I love 3 kids. So 2 of them are graduating, and one of them is 10. So he has a few more years left. I love them. I just want the world to be a better place for them. And I think about that every day, along with a lot of other Texans families and Texas kids. I just want the world to be better for them than what we're giving them. I just don't want to die knowing that I left the world a much worse place. I have to try to leave them something that they can hold on to, so I just want to try to do my best for them. I'm worried about the future. Of course, like most parents, we're always thinking about the future, always worried about the future for our children. And so we just want the best. And so I'm just going to do everything I can to create whatever I can to improve everything for them.
I'm sure I can speak on behalf of many moms that we're grateful to you and what you do.
Thank you. Oh, you're so sweet.
You have the Gen Z initiative. Does that play into what you're talking about right now? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Here's the deal. I'm Gen X. I don't know what gen you're in. I think you're Gen X.
Gen X.
I'm Gen X. Yeah, like I loved being Gen X. I loved it. Loved every second. It's been so fun.
We're the forgotten generation. I think we're okay with that.
Yeah. In some ways, yeah. And in some ways I'm like, hey, what about us? To have these moments, but I'm a Gen X mom. I have Gen Z kids. I just really feel like this is a really good opportunity to support our children. I think they can have an enormous impact in this world. And I want to create that avenue for them to where they can go out in the world and have this enormous, amazing impact. I think that they are the future. I think that these kids are change makers. Also, we have to remember these kids are our kids. And I like to, when I was in high school, it was, a lot of the things that happened in high school were really like, they didn't happen after college. A lot of things kind of went away. Like in high school, when we started high school, there was a lot of fear against people being gay or homosexuality. I mean, trans wasn't even really a thing, but we knew it was a thing, but we didn't have a word for it then.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I graduated from college, the world really had changed. There was a lot more acceptance. There was a lot more equality. There was a lot more just people just accepting people as they are. And then I went to go work in high tech, and it was a really amazing, dynamic place full of people from all over the world, and people were accepted as they were. And it was pretty dynamic, all kinds of people, all kinds of religions and cultures and backgrounds. And they were from all over the United States. And it was an amazing experience to be working in high tech during that time, and then working through the .com boom phase, several of them, because they went up and down. So we have survived through several phases of that. So yeah, I'm excited about Gen Z. I'm excited about what they can do. I like to think that the fact that our generation evolved has had a positive impact on how we have raised this generation of kids. Because like for the most part, I do think that this generation of kids is really open-minded. I mean, there are kids, they're really well educated. They like to have arguments at the table about issues. They have very diverse friends. The friend groups that they have include everyone. I mean, include so many different religions, so many people it's a very diverse group. And my kids don't even care if somebody comes out as gay, they're still going to be friends with them. Like they don't care. Whereas like when I was in high school, they were, gay people were definitely treated differently. And I see how my children just accept everybody. And I think that that's amazing. This is what we want. We want acceptance. Yeah. We want to let all of the children know that we accept them as they are and we love them as they are. And I think that that is really something that our generation, Gen X generation, made sure that we didn't have a lot of what happened in the 80s continue on into current times. We just want to make sure that we evolved. And so I think that's really important. I mean, a lot of things that were wrong, we've been trying to correct. And I do think it's our generation who's been trying to do those corrections, without a doubt.
Absolutely. I find a lot of
Oh,
resistance from some older generations right now. I know I experience that in my field, just constant brick walls everywhere. And I feel like our generation is a little different in that regard.
yeah, absolutely. Without a doubt. It's been kind of an interesting week. So I don't know when this podcast is going to air, but this week was the week where all of the colleges are protesting and the police are coming down. They're arresting the students. There's a lot of stuff going on. And some things that I'm hearing from some of the older people are like, those darn kids, they shouldn't be doing this and they shouldn't be doing that and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I have a different take on things. I have to say, while I don't always agree with every single protest on the planet, I don't always agree with it, but in the United States, we have the right to protest. And that is our First Amendment right, which is the freedom of speech and freedom to protest. And we were actually founded as a country based on protesting. That is the very core of everything that we do as a country, as a democracy. This is how we got started. So it's super important to me to say, you know what? This is what we do. This is what we do. And if you go to other countries in Europe, there's always a protest going on. I mean, last summer, I went to London and I went to Paris and there were protests going on. They shut down the trains. They shut down buildings. There was stuff going on. Was I inconvenienced? Yes, I was. I did not get to do one trip that I had planned. I was definitely inconvenienced. Was I happy about it? I wasn't happy about it. But you know what? Things happen and just, but protests happen and it was sort of it's sort of an accepted thing in society there. Whereas like in America, it's not as accepted, believe it or not, but we were the original instigators or agitators in this whole thing. And this is what we're based on. I mean, America's based on a protest. So when I see these students protesting, I think they're practicing their First Amendment rights. And honestly, I'm going to have a total honest conversation here. When the January 6th protesters were out peacefully protesting, they were just doing what they wanted to do. They had the right to protest. What they did not have the right to do was to vandalize the Capitol, the violence, the things that kind of came afterwards. That's the problem right there. When they were like trying to hurt people, that's the problem. That is the problem. So I think that there is like a fine line and we should always be on the side of peaceful protest, no matter what. I think when they cross that line is when things get kind of crazy. And it's really kind of hard to gauge if there's a bad guy, there's a good guy. And the thing is that sometimes there isn't a bad guy and a good guy, but like our mentality is always like, oh, there's always a bad guy. There's always a good guy. But here, it's so super complicated, especially the issue that they are protesting right now. It's super duper complicated. And it is very reflective of the protests that we saw in the 60s. Is it exactly like what we saw in the 60s? Oh no, it's totally different, but it is reflective of the same type of protests that we had seen before. And I think that through history and time, when students rise up and they protest something, we should all be paying attention because usually they're right. I'm going to say that. I think historically, they've been right. They've been fighting for the right for speech, whatever. I mean, we have to remember that students protest in Tiananmen Square, the student protests in Kent State, the student protesting like all over the United States during the 60s.
The New Spring, that was a lot of students.
They're trying to tell us something. Yeah, I think protests, I mean, we can either ignore it, we can down talk it, we can other it by othering the people, or we can stop and listen and learn. And so I'm kind of hoping that we stop and we listen, we learn, and we try to figure out what they're saying, because people do not protest like that in a community if they're happy. They just don't. They only protest like that when they're unhappy with something that's going on in the community. And a lot of these students, I think that they have fair points in how they want divestments from the country of Israel. And I'm going to say country because it's not the same thing as saying they want to divest from Jewish people. That's not what they're saying. They're saying they want to divest from the country of Israel, which is, all the things that are going on there in the Middle East. There's definitely points to be made on multiple sides. But I think that the things that get muddled is that people think that Jewish people and Israel are like the exact same thing. And they are to a point, but Israel is a country and Jewish people, that's a religion. There's a little bit of a difference. Even though Israel is the Jewish country, that's fine, but we have Jewish people all over the world. So we have to sort of separate the two when it comes to that. And a lot of people have a lot of problems separating the two, and they have a lot of problems seeing how complicated this issue is. It's so complicated. There's so many different layers of the issues and the protests, the things that are going on right now. The things that are especially hard is that we have to remember there's so much generational trauma that we all carry. We have to be able to talk about hard things, but talking about hard things also brings up some generational trauma. And some people can have enough critical thinking skills, like they can think things through and see multiple viewpoints. And some people just can't. They just can't think things through and see things critically from somebody else's shoe or a different viewpoint. And the inability to be able to use your critical thinking skills and put yourself in somebody else's shoes in different positions is what's really hurting us right now, because it's so much easier to other people, and to othering is it's an easy thing to do at the moment. The hard thing to do at the moment is to engage with people who are different from you and have deep, heartfelt conversations. And those deep, heartfelt conversations can happen because I'm going to give you an example. I talked to someone recently and they came to my house and we're having this conversation and they said, "Oh, and all these people, can you believe what they're doing to the Jewish people and all this stuff?" And then the next sentence, they spoke really poorly about Netanyahu and how much they do not like Netanyahu. And I said, "Do you realize the protesters also don't like Netanyahu? So you both don't like Netanyahu. Do you realize that, right?" And he's like, "But they're against Jewish people." No, they're not. They're not. They're mostly against Netanyahu's, the way that he is just handling all of the issues and stuff. They're really against that. So I was trying to find really kind words to bring her to the table to explain some of these issues. And it was hard. I just think it's hard. I think it's hard. I think it's really hard. And my very good friends are Jewish, several of them. I have several very good friends that are Jewish, and I am Christian, and we have friends that are Muslim as well. And I can see so many different variances, but what I don't want to do as a person right now is necessarily choose one side over the other, because my heart is so broken for both sides. And when I think about it, it just breaks. When I think about the people in Israel who were killed in that initial bombing last October, that bombing and how awful it was, it makes me want to cry. And then when I think of the 2-month-old who died from starvation in Gaza, that makes me want to cry. And when I think about the fact that my daughter, who has friends that are Muslim and friends that are Jewish and friends that are Christian, and when she comes home crying because her friend group, who have been really good friends for 5 years, when they no longer get along because they're fighting about this issue, it just completely breaks me. I don't know what to say, because I think the things that break me is that there is no right answer. There's nothing that I can say or do without somebody putting me in a corner and making me choose a side or blaming me for something. And I just feel like our hands are just tied.
I hear two things. The first one is there's a lot of difficult topics that you in your field obviously have to address or is brought to you. You can't even not address it. But the other thing is I'm hearing issues around communication, because it sounds like these issues, like it's all subjective based on our own story, our own experience, what we were raised to believe. That's how we come to the conclusions that we have. Everyone does. And we're all heroes in our own story. So we're never the bad guys, right? But there's problems with talking to other people that believe something different, regardless of what the issue is or what this universal you person falls on the side of the belief. Is that what I'm hearing you say? That's the hard part?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I have this idealistic thing in my head. I was like, what if I took a group of moms and we all got together and we could talk about this? And what if we tried? What if we tried to understand one another? What if we held hands? What if we made a heartfelt moment and movement to put peaceful energy out to the universe where we could make positive change? What would that look like? What would that feel like?
Nancy, you have faced significant difficulty as you've gotten this movement off the ground and up and running. It seems like there has been a huge learning curve on social media for how to deal with the public. I mean, you've had attacks both for what you believe and also personal attacks against yourself. What have you personally learned in order to protect yourself and stay mentally healthy through all of this? Because you are still out there fighting for what it is that you believe despite all of the ugliness. Can you talk about that?
One thing I learned is that any single time you're online and you are doing work in social media, you might put out a message and it always goes to your core group first. And you don't hear too much from the far right or from the extremists. You will not start hearing from them until about 4 to 9 hours after your original post. And then you'll start getting attacks. And then they post it to their friends and then their friends start attacking you. So my suggestions if you're in that situation is you need to close off your comments and then start cleaning out the comments and don't open up the comments again. Or if you decide to open them up again, do it like 24 hours later. Just wait, give it a period of time. Because what is happening is that the far right people or these little groups of people that post these nasty messages and encourage other people posting attacks and bullying and nasty messages, they tend to work in the middle of the night. They are always a few hours behind. They never get it right at that second. And they usually go in groups. They're usually attacking you as groups. And then when we trace the IP addresses, it's pretty clear that some of these people, they work in the same building or same location. So these are obviously troll farming that is doing a lot of the attacking. So I think once we realize that, we're like, okay, we don't have to worry about this. We can kind of take this down a notch. And so I think that, yeah, while we should be worried about some extremism across the country, for the most part, the real crazy nuts are not. They work in like, they're scared. They don't ever show their faces, that kind of thing. And I don't really think that we need to be as scared about them online. But there are some scary people online. I will have to say, I have a stalker and she lives in a town very close to me. And she has put terrible things about me and my organization online. Almost all of them are lies, or they're just like half truths and not really explaining the situation. She is a troublemaker and she has caused a lot of strife in the Democratic Party. And she's a Republican, but the Democrats are sort of like letting her have that platform and letting her talk for them. And that makes me crazy because so many Democrats are following her because they like the drama. And when I noticed that so many people start following her for the drama, I was like, that really said a lot to me about people. And at that point, I just kind of pulled back and I was like, you know what? There's some of these people that really like trolls and really like drama and they really like tearing down each other in the Democratic Party. And I just want nothing to do with that. So at that point, I like really pulled back. and just decided I'm going to just do what I do, which is create good messaging, try to build community, try to make ads, try to create infrastructure to a certain degree for Texas Democrats where there is none. And I just want to do good things. I want Texas to turn blue because I want to make sure that my children live in a Texas that is accepting of everyone. That's a great Texas. And I want Texas to be blue. So I'm working on that. I had to do, again, fight or flight. I could sit there and I could fight with them, or I could have a flight where I just completely shut down. And I didn't want to do either one, but I didn't want to give them the benefit of my platform either. So I kind of had to take my voice back and had to take part of my life back. And I sort of had to make an announcement like, I'm taking part of my life back. And I think owning your life and taking that back and taking back that ownership of what you want to do with your own personal brand and who you are, and you know who you are, is really super duper important. Because I just had to make sure that like this person who's been trolling me wasn't going to have the last word. They're not going to get the best of me. I mean, I do really good work and they're a crazy extremist troll Republican and they were not going to take me down. I was just going to keep on going and keep on trugging along. So that's kind of what I've been doing. So I think I've been getting attacked on all sides.
That's actually a great lead in for a question that I've wanted to ask you about. This past spring, your organization put out an extremely powerful ad that I think went viral in days. But what followed was a significant amount of attack. And I remember you receiving hate mail and all kinds of threats. What did you do to get through that? Because you're still here and that must have taken a lot of resilience. How did you do that?
So we put out an ad called Thoughts and Prayers. And when we put that ad out, it went out on Thursday and I got such a great response. We got great responses on Thursday and Friday. And by the time the weekend rolled around, there were threats. There were terrible things being said to me and about me. And it was all coming from the far right. And I talked to my team because it's hard to read those emails. It's like the impact on you and the impact on you psychologically is really hard. So we were looking at all those emails and we're like, where is this coming from? Like, let's figure this out. And we were able to trace most of the emails to 2 IP addresses. Majority of the emails came from the same 2 locations, which is crazy. It's so crazy. After that, we started noticing trends. And this is a trend that was also noticed by friends of mine they were attacked by the libs of TikTok. They said they only work in the middle of the night. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start tracking this stuff. And sure enough, when it's in the evening, all of a sudden the Republican trolls get online and they start attacking you for stuff. They start doing like takedowns and messaging you and retweeting your things and saying terrible things. I learned a few things from this. I learned that most of this is coming from a few farms. So these are not actual real people. 2 is that it's coming several hours, if not days later. We noticed that we might put up a post and the hate mail might start between 4 and 9 hours after a post. A lot of times it's really late. It takes them a long time to actually say anything. It's one of those things. They're not the first people out the gate. They're really always very late. So there's that. And then you might want to put a post out. And once you start seeing the negative comments go on there, turn off your comments. Just turn it off because they will bombard you. They will bury you and stuff. It'll be terrible. Just turn it off. And they're going to get mad because you turn it off. And then once you turn it off, and if you get retweeted or something, you can go in there, you can start blocking people. That's just what you do. Yes, you just have to turn it off and you have to block people and you have to take care of stuff. And you always know that they don't operate on normal hours. They are always behind 4 to 9 hours. And most of it is coming from a couple locations. And once you realize that, then that kind of makes you feel a little bit better. Also, I do have to say, I did teach college once. I was teaching English in college and I did an online course in college for one day or 2 days of the week, the kids would go to computer lab and they would communicate not in person, but they'd be in computer labs all over the campus, wherever they wanted to be. We were, because the internet was not like a thing then, so they had to go to computer labs. Anyway, so they to go to computer labs and we do all of our classwork and socializing in this computer lab environment. And when they did that, a lot of bullying started happening. And I was noticing bullying behavior with my students then. And I did a study on it, I did a paper on it. I talked to the lead professor, my lead about this, and my advisor, and was like, hey, I'm noticing these trends with people online. So I have known since I was in my 20s that people, when they get online and they get on Twitter, Facebook, or social media, they become bullies. Those people in person might be the nicest people you ever meet, but then online, they turn into the devil. It's something clicks and they are just awful. And they're there for the drama. They're there for the takedown. They're there for the comments. And so they want to behave as such. There's no decency online, rarely. I mean, that's just what it is. And it isn't everybody, because I don't want to generalize that's everybody, but a lot of those same people, they become different people online. They become braver. I think we might see real parts of their personality come out, and we just have to be aware of that. So I think people can be very different on social media than they are in real life. So on social media, that might be threatening your life. And then if you see them in person, they'll be like, I'm the nicest guy ever. I would never do that for you. I would never hurt you. But then online, they want to kill you. And they say terrible things and they call you terrible words. But in person, probably most of them aren't even brave enough to say anything to your face. That's just been my experience.
I know there's people that are going to hear you say that and they're going to cringe and want to hide under a table. How do you not take stuff like that personal and stay up and ruminate for weeks? And I mean, I'm sure you do a little bit of that, but you wouldn't be able to function if you weren't having some kind of barrier or armor. What do you do?
What do you mean cringe under the table if they hear that from what? From about people?
That getting that kind of attack on the internet, getting that level of comments, people just going at you. You get one comment and you worry about it for 6 days. Like, you sound like a superhero.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like a superhero, but I do want to say this about it. This is not a time to be quiet. It's a time for brave politics. It's time to speak up. It's time to speak out. It's time for brave politics. We have to be less afraid about other people because then we let them win. We let them be the brave ones. And do we really want them to be the brave ones who say terrible things? Or do we want decent people to say good things, community building things, loving things, coming from a good place? Do we want to hear from them or do we want to hear from the terrible people? Because if we want to hear from the terrible people and we only allow them to have voices, then that's what we're producing. So I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. So I want to hear from good people. We have to have brave politics. Brave politics is my answer. Yeah. They think that I am the enemy. They actually have called me enemy numero uno. They told me I'm on the enemies list, and I'm not. If I was their enemy, I wouldn't be working this hard to turn Texas blue. I just wouldn't be. It's too bad they don't see it because we could be so powerful if we all work together.
One of the things that made me admire you in the very beginning when we met was when you were attacked for not being extreme about our belief. And you said, these are opportunities to educate other people that don't believe these things. And it doesn't matter what the thing is. When I heard you say that, I was like, anyone can take that advice and sit down and have a conversation and say, let me tell you why this is important. Not you're a blah, blah, blah because you don't think this thing. Well, maybe that person doesn't understand. I don't know, doesn't have experience with it. There's so much that people don't have experience with. And I love the teacher in you that came out. The art teacher, showed her head. Yeah. Can you talk about that perspective?
Absolutely. there are so many new terms and so many new types of terminology for all kinds of things on this planet now. For example, I learned a bunch of new terms for the new type of fascism that we're seeing right now because I'm really taking some deep dives into fascism. And I didn't even know some of these terms. And I was like, oh my gosh, where'd this term come from? And where did that term come from? And I'm constantly learning. There are so many people out there in this world that are constantly learning. So they might not know about pronouns and they might not know about the variety of genders or acronyms in the LGBTQ community. And what we shouldn't do is we shouldn't shame anybody. We shouldn't shame them. We should say, oh, they're trans. This is what this means. Or they use these types of pronouns. And I understand you might get them mixed up and that's okay. But, if you kind of catch yourself, maybe you can remember to use them. But if not, it's okay. Like, that's fine. But no one wants to be shamed into it. And I think that's one of the things that the Republicans picked up on is that they were being shamed, I think, for maybe not recognizing people's pronouns. So then they turned it all on us. But I think if we go into any kind of community that we go into and we go into it with the mindset of we're there to educate them in a kind way, I think the reception of what we do and who we are would be a lot better. That really is it. I actually was talking about this last night. I'm working on a project, which I'm really excited. It's going to roll out soon, but I'm not going to tell too much about it. This is going to be a benefit to all Texans, especially rural Texans, all Texans, because we were all hit really hard during the big ice storm, the freeze here in Texas. And we have an opportunity to file some lawsuits and get some of that money back, which would be so exciting. And so I'm working on this initiative to help everyday communities across Texas file their claims so they can get more money back from the freeze because it impacted all of our utility bills, every single person's utility bill. And it impacted their lives. Some people's houses burnt down. Some people had dust in their family. I mean, it was absolutely horrific. So I was talking to somebody last night and I was just saying Democrats need to go out into the community and they need to remind people who we are. And who we are is, as I tell everybody, who we are is WWWD. We show up. What would Willie do? We all need to start showing up like Willie Nelson in our communities. We need to start on the ground, talking to people, having face-to-face conversations, and showing up as Democrats, wearing our shirt that says, I'm a proud Democrat. Because the thing is that when good things happen in our communities, chances are there's a Democrat behind it. And that is my philosophy, and I'm going to stick to that because I have yet to be proven wrong. When there is good things happening where people care about other people, people care about their health care, people care about people voting, people care about things that are happening in their community and speaking up in school boards and speaking up here and speaking up there and protecting our students. Honestly, and even in COVID, when people cared about making sure that we got enough COVID vaccinations to the communities, the people who organized a lot of that stuff, they were all Democrats because we're really good at organizing. So a lot of the times when that work needed to be done, it was being done by Democrats. And it's super important work that was being done by Democrats. I think that we just need to remind people that Democrats care about people. We care about the community. We care about people. We care about farmers. We care about policemen. We care about firemen. We care about teachers. We care about, the person who's working behind the HEB counter. I mean, we care about each other. That is what we do as Democrats. We care. And it's really important to put that message out in the universe and let people know that we care about other people and that we're there and that we're Democrats, but we care. We're not libertards. Okay. We're not socialists. Also, the other day I had to remind somebody that Democrats are capitalists. I had a phone call and I was interviewed for an article in the Texan, and it was about superintendent pay. They wanted to know how I felt about superintendent pay. So this is how I feel about superintendent pay. We have individuals that go to school. They go to graduate school. They go to beyond graduate school. They go get their PhDs. They are experts in their field. They manage thousands of students. And when they're negotiating a pay for this role or position, It's a free market. We like free markets, right? Because we're capitalists, right? Because Democrats are capitalists, not just Democrats, but Americans. We believe in a free market. Free market, isn't that like a Republican thing? Don't they love the free market? So part of the free market is that we can go and interview for a job and negotiate our salary. So when the superintendents go and they interview for jobs and negotiate their salary, they're in the free market. They're negotiating for the salary that they want based on the number of years of school, their experience, their responsibilities, etc. And when you think of somebody, they're basically the CEO of a whole entire educational system. And CEOs of companies these days, like they're in charge of a company, they're really in charge of like profit and revenue, right? So they go in there with the mindset of like, how can I make more money? How can I make more money? Superintendents do not go into the universe with roles of how can I make more money? Superintendents go into the roles of how can I take care of my teachers? How can I take care of my students? How do I take care of these employees? How do I manage, logistics? How do I manage the budget? How do I manage this? And so many times superintendents are the accountants. They have multiple roles. They're the counselors. They handle so many different roles. It isn't the same thing as a CEO. So if a superintendent is getting paid $300,000 a year, but they manage 70,000 students and staff, the amount of money that they're getting paid per employee is the market. It's set by the market. It is what it is. And it's pretty reasonable considering the market and once you divide it up by levels of responsibilities. So I just think it's really important that we remind people just because we're Democrats does not mean we're not capitalists. Just because we're Democrats does not mean we don't like a free market. We do like the free market, but we also want the free market to pay people what they're worth. So we're Democrats. We like the free market. We think it's great that superintendents are getting decent pay. They deserve it, but our teachers do too. Now do the teachers. They deserve decent pay. And they deserve rules and regulations around their pay to look a little bit differently so they can get paid a living wage. A lot of our teachers do not get paid enough. And their aides, we have teacher aides across Texas that don't even make $20,000 a year. And they live they live on less than $20,000 a year. That's not fair. And we know that's not right. And we know that the majority of the people in these positions of aides or helpers, majority of them are women. And it's because our society has said it's okay to pay women less. We need equality in wages as women because it trickles down to every single corner and crevice of our community and society. So if we increase pay, that really is going to help keep kids out of poverty. It's just going to trickle everywhere and make our communities a much healthier place to live.
It's been over half a century since the civil rights movement, and I still hear you saying so many things that I know a lot of us Gen Xers thought was addressed. I made this joke before. We thought Gloria Steinem burned all the bras and the world is a better place. And I feel like it's worse. I feel like there's underground misogyny because people can't come out and say exactly what they think anymore, like you were saying. What are you seeing out there? Is it getting worse? I mean, you work with a lot of women in a really tough field.
Well, I'm lucky enough that I know a variety of women from all over the place that get paid what they're worth. They're lawyers or doctors. They're out there and they're getting paid what they're worth. I think there's lots of people that get paid what they're worth. I think that the people that I'm seeing right now in politics that are not getting paid what they're worth are the grassroots organizers and honestly, the activists like me. I have now been working for this organization. I got paid in 2022. I got paid some money, but I didn't get paid until like right before the election. So I worked all year without pay and then I got paid in October. And then that was my last paycheck. I got paid a lump sum. I did not get paid starting November of 22 until currently. So I myself, I deserve to get paid. I work so hard. 8 would be an understatement. I'm going to say 10 to sometimes 17 hours a day, every day of the week. I rarely take a day off. I work on this nonstop. I'm constantly working. I'm constantly traveling across the state, talking to people, meeting with people, encouraging people, doing speeches all over the place to kind of get the spirits up in Texas. So I do a lot of this work, and I have not been paid since November of 22, and I would like to get paid. I think we need to pay people what they're worth, and I have not been paid. Some of it's probably my fault, I'll be totally honest. But then some of it is the fact that, like, when I look at the budget and I look at stuff I'm doing, I'm trying to save up money to do ads. So I'm pouring myself into this because I want Texas to turn blue. And I'm in this turn Texas blue. And so I'm pouring all my heart and soul into this. And when we think about this, there's so many women in our society that are just like me. Society is run by women's free labor. And that's the truth. When you have the volunteers at your schools and the PTA stuff, and like how many women go out there and do volunteer work for free? They volunteer, of course it's free. They volunteer and they in different roles, regardless of whether or not they have a full-time job. That is free labor. Women make this world go round, and they put a ton of free labor. And compare that to the men in our lives. My husband just recently started volunteering. He started coaching my son's flag football team and his soccer team. And he complains to me about this volunteer role nonstop. And I just want to laugh because it's like, what do you think I've been doing forever? You know, I've been heading up Girl Scouts. I've been heading up all these groups. I'm like the school mom, you know, classroom mom. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Always volunteering. He volunteers for one thing. He complains about it nonstop. I volunteer, and it's just sort of like, just like take it and do it. There's a little bit of a difference. There's a lot of us women that go out there and we do volunteer work, and we work so hard, and we just do it. We just get the shit done. We're good at spreadsheets. We're good at using online tools, and we just get it done. Those are definitely a lot of things that need to be addressed. In this political space, we need to start paying people what they're worth. I think it's really important that we do.
I love it. I'm such a fan because you have such a great way of communicating. And what I've seen are great examples of your teaching ability and your way to reach across whatever aisle or barrier is blocking people and help them see things from a different perspective. They may still not agree, but at least it's a teaching moment. Have you learned that? Or is that kind of an innate gift? Can people learn to do that like you do?
I have no idea. All I know is that I don't really want to hurt anyone. So I'm willing to listen to them until they call me names. I'm willing to listen to what they say. My mind is flexible enough that I can take it in and I could be like, okay, I see your viewpoint. Okay, you're right. That's fair. I can reply to somebody and say, that's a fair point. I understand where you're coming from. And I'm okay with other people until they call me names. And once they call me names, then I'm no longer okay with them. I'm okay with it until then. And at that point, then I block them. I'm done. Once they call me names. But once they call names or they use really bad language, then I'm just like, I'm done. I don't need to engage with people that are just going to suck up my time. The other thing I wanted to say something, I heard something interesting today about social media, and I want to say something about social media. I want everyone to take a deep breath, practice sort of detoxifying yourself a little bit from social media. So like we go in there and we think of it as an instrument of purpose. We have to think of it as like the messages that we put out on social media. Those are the messages we send out into the world. And what do we want the world to hear? Try to do it a little bit more with a sense of purpose of bringing people together or making a point. But don't sit there and hang out till you get responses or comments, or don't check it all the time. I think being on social media a couple times a day and putting up a couple posts and just walking away from it is probably pretty healthy. To be totally honest. It's really healthy. I think when you sit there and you read it and you read all the comments and stuff, and it's a drag and it totally brings you down, and it can be really terrible on your psyche. So just don't do it. Just go in there with a purpose, check a couple messages. And if you hit a message just really bad, like this morning, I hit a message that was so bad this morning, I had to shut down my Twitter immediately. I was like, not today, Satan, not today. Goodbye. And I like shut it down and walked away and then went back, an hour or so later when I was in a different headspace. But that was just not the way I was going to start my day. It was just not. I was not going to like let that energy be put out there. Sometimes we just have to think about that. We just have to think about that and just go in there with like a purpose. And I always have the philosophy, like if something bad happens to me, I always try to put out some good energy out there right afterwards by doing a couple really positive acts of kindness. On my feed, that usually looks like plants and butterflies and stuff like that. When you see me putting out a picture of like flowers or plants or butterflies on my page, that's me trying to be like, okay, world, you need to look at something pretty for just a minute because there's a lot of terrible things out here. That's usually it. That really is it. I do think that I try to counter all the bad stuff with some good stuff. And we need to have discipline. You go in there, you're in social media and you're out and you need to take your time back. You need to reclaim your time that you're spending on social media and take it back. It will just eat you alive.
I heard some great step-by-step stuff in there. I heard a really great boundary. You're going to do this until someone calls you a name or says words you're not okay with. Like that's clear.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people struggle with at what point do they say in this climate, enough is enough? How kind do you have to be? This epidemic of niceness, right?
Yeah. We can have our own boundaries. Just because somebody has access to social media does not mean they have access to talk to you the way they talk to you. And you can shut that down. Like I can have a debate. I can have a disagreement with somebody. I have made Republican people actually stop and think about where I'm coming from several times because we were able to have that conversation in a respectful way. And then they responded with like, wow, this was actually a very respectful conversation. I'm like, yep, it was. I'm not a jerk. We can have a conversation. But once they call me a bad word, it's over. It's block, because they were never there with good intentions if they were going to do that. Anyway, that's just how I feel about it.
Do you think social media is playing a part in this divisive atmosphere we have? People are, like you said, they're not themselves. What do we do to counter that? How do we get back to having face-to-face conversations and hearing each other?
Again, we all need to start. COVID, even though it's not over, it's sort of over. I mean, we have a workable situation now. It's hard to be terrible to somebody up close. I learned that from Brene Brown. It's hard to say something bad to somebody when they're up close to you. We all need to learn how to talk to one another again, especially in a post-COVID world. It's super important to learn how to reach across the aisle, learn how to talk to people again, get to know other people again, and, just stop and listen to one another. And we need to do that. So I'm kind of hoping that we're able to start that again. I think it's very, very important. Social media leads to depression, leads to anxiety. And I know that many, many times I have logged into social media and just immediately went into like fight or flight or just something happens. And if this is happening to me, an adult, it is certainly happening to our children. It's certainly happening to everybody we know where they see something on social media and they just immediately want to shut down. It would be so much easier to get together in person and feel good endorphins from seeing people in person, because you do get really great, good feeling endorphins from being around other people. And that's what we need to encourage these days. We need people to start seeing each other up close.
What kind of advice do you have for the folks coming up behind us, the Gen Zs and the younger millennials that are struggling right now? You've had such amazing experience.
I don't really know if I can give advice other than when I was a Gen X, they thought that our generation was never going to go out and vote. And then we grew up and we all started going out and voting. I'm seeing a lot of the things that people are saying about Gen X, that people said about Gen X, being said about the millennials and Gen Z, I would just wish people would try something new, honestly. Instead of telling them what they're doing wrong, why don't we just talk about what they're doing right? Okay. I think we should focus on what they're doing right and encourage them and focus on the good things, because when people hear good things about themselves and their generation, they want to do more good things. Nobody wants to go out there and do good things by other people talking and saying terrible things. So I just want to encourage them just to keep up the attitude. I want to encourage them to vote. I want them to register to vote. And I want them to admit if they do not know how to vote on, they don't know who to vote for, they don't have information, I want them to go look at our website and go look on Vote 411 or the League of Women Voters, or look at our endorsements. I want them to know that they can go into a voting booth and not feel like they're stupid and don't know anything. We can educate them, and we can educate people and other people by not shaming them and not making them feel stupid because they don't know all the issues. We need to meet them where they're at, no matter who they are, and no matter what age group they're in or how old they are or anything. I just think we should just educate people and meet them where they're at.
I love that.